Could you please put your hands together for Joe Rogers?
Thank you. Thanks, Samuel. Appreciate that.
Okay. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So Samuel said, thank you, Samuel, for that introduction. My name is Joe Rogers, and I don't want anybody leaving when I say I'm a lawyer, and I'm here to talk to you about joint ventures this evening. Question to anybody, does anybody not know about joint ventures in property? Not know what that is? Okay, great. Then I've got a question for you.
Enough.
You don't know enough? Great. Okay, well, this talk is about bigger joint ventures with smaller risk. So my aim is not to suggest that you go out there, you get into joint ventures with everybody. The idea is you get into bigger joint ventures, smaller risk. And I want to walk you through a process, as Samuel was telling you about earlier, a process that I walk most of my PIN attendees through. But I'm not going to go through it in minutiae today. Why? Because what I find is that on Wednesday at about 8 o'clock, this is when people start nodding off. So I'm going to make this as interactive as possible, and you are welcome at the end to come and collect one of these. This is my joint venture checklist, or scorecard as I call it, or a card, and I'll send it to you, no problem. And we're not going to go through the minutiae of the scorecard today, but I am going to walk you through it on the slides. Is that okay? Yep. Great. How many people have heard me speak before by a show of hands? Very few. Oh, that's even better. Because every time people come to this talk, I'm like, it's going to be the same one. Just hopefully different answers. So, smaller. Question to you guys. What is a joint venture and why do we joint venture? Show of hands. Yes.
The leveraging of two people's skills or assets.
The leveraging of two people's skills or assets. That's a great description of what a joint venture is. You've got two people coming together, two or more people, in fact, two or more people coming together to build something bigger, usually. 2 plus 2 in a joint venture usually equals 5 or more. It never equals just 4. Why do we joint venture?
Someone's got a skill you don't have.
Someone's got a skill you don't have.
Or an asset.
Minimize risk. Anyone else?
They have an asset that you don't have.
Or they have an asset that you don't have. So really, the word that I use for joint ventures is leverage. It gives you leverage. It gives you leverage in skills. It gives you leverage in time. It might give you leverage in money. It could give you leverage in assets. It allows two people, Chris and I, to come together and say, we're going to build something that's bigger than just what I can do and what he can do alone. Clear? So the reason that we would want bigger joint ventures is because then we can exponentially grow either our property portfolio or our property business, whatever it is that we want to do. Very beneficial. Simon from for PIN Academy, he teaches a lot about joint ventures. My job tonight is to make those joint ventures a little bit safer, a little bit more thought through. So who am I? My name is Joe Rogers, as I said at the beginning, and I am a lawyer. I set out in life working with the big boys in the banks and the big law firms. And as time has gone on, I've started working with small and mid-sized businesses, and many of those are property businesses, those people who they need access to what I call affordable legal wisdom. That's wisdom, that's more than knowledge, that requires a little bit more hand-holding. I've helped companies raise over £500 million worth of investment. I'm qualified in New York and qualified here. I have worked for the big boys like American Express were a client. I've worked for big law firms, US companies, and US clients. And now NaviStar Legal is my baby. That is, I'm the founder of NaviStar Legal, and we provide affordable legal wisdom to small and mid-sized businesses. Now, this is purely for context of a story later on, but one of my mentors is a guy called Mike Harris, who set up a little-known bank called First Direct 25 years ago. And what he did is what he suggested that I do in my business, and it's what I'm going to share with you, some of which I'm going to share with you today. And he helped for me to realize this vision of 1,000 next generation lawyers that provide affordable legal wisdom to small and mid-sized businesses. So that's who I am. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about what the joint venture process usually looks or should look like when it comes to property. And then we'll compare it to what it usually looks like. So the first thing is you structure the deal. Now, with many of us, it might be just, I'm going to take 50%, Francis is going to take 50%. That's a joint venture, right? 50-50. It might, yeah, well done, Francis. You're welcome, you're welcome. You don't know what a joint venture is yet, so, well, so we're going to go 50-50. Many people, I call it the finger in the air. 50%, 50%? 50%? Yeah, 50%. It feels like 50%. It's usually what our mentors have done, or somebody tells you, I just get into a 50-50 joint venture. Not necessarily what you need to do with a joint venture, but that's how you structure it. So even if it's just as simple as saying 50-50, 50-50. Then you might decide, right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell people about it. Now, earlier on in PIN, you had the chance to get up and do 20 seconds, and there was a little reminder, do not promote any deals if you're not FCA regulated. Now, there's a reason for that, because it is actually a criminal offence for which you will end up going to jail if you promote two people and as a result they make losses. So it could cause people a problem if you then start promoting. So if I come up here and I say, guys, I've got a 50-50 joint venture, and one of you comes to me and you lose money under that, then you will have a right or a right of claim. So we don't promote to the public at large. That includes Facebook. That includes in networking meetings. I'm not going to go into the specifics. If you want more details, there's a guy called John Corey, C-O-R-E-Y, of Property Fortress. He goes into a lot about this. But then we go and we promote. So how we promote, we would prefer to speak to high net worth individuals or sophisticated investors. We then, and this is the kind of crux of what I'm going to talk about today, we then investigate. We find out all about Chris, and we find out all about Francis, and we learn about what they do, how they do it, and whether they're the right joint venture partner for us. And today, that's what I'm going to be talking about, the investigation. Now, so far, usually what I see is people going, all right, 50-50 joint venture, let's go. And they're off. Which is great, because sometimes we get stuck in the not doing, but actually what we've got to do is get stuck in the not doing, start doing some of the right things. And that's where we're going to focus on. So once you've investigated, when I've investigated these, Chris might say, you know what, Joe, you can have 50%, but I'm actually going to take, I'm going to be the person who owns the asset. I'm like, it doesn't work for me. Francis, on the other hand, says, yeah, go ahead, you can have the asset. So there's a bit of negotiation. And I start talking to them, I start working out what's going to work for me. And then I might go with Chris, I might go with Francis, let's go with both of you. We sign on the dotted line there, thanks, yeah, that's great. And Francis, great, excellent, 2 JVs, how quick is that in 20 minutes? We sign them up. And then, if they're investing in me, hopefully, we then continue to communicate with them and say, hey, Chris, joint venture's doing really well, property's nearly developed, we're doing well. Francis, we've got everything, it's moving, everything's slow, everything always takes twice as long and costs twice as much, right? So we communicate with them, and then hopefully we can rinse and repeat and go back to the beginning and say, right, I've got a 75-25 joint venture, who wants that? And we go out and promote it. Oh, I see your hand going up. Oh, yeah. It's not a real deal. Just So this is what a structured deal ought to look like. It's what it looks like at the big boy level, at the corporate level. But often, so often, in the smaller, person where you're being told, joint venture, find somebody in the room, joint venture with them, we don't give it enough thought to go through this process. And that's what I want to just give you a sense of today. So I have a philosophy, and it's important you know my philosophy, partly because it's kind of who I am and how I've built what I've built, but it's also important for you guys as well, because so many times, I think when I grew up, I was thinking I might be Ally McBeal, or some lawyer that was cool and exciting, but I also had a certain, has anybody watched Suits by a show of hands? Right, there's a certain image we have of lawyers, right, and a certain image we have of law, and I just want to kind of break some of those myths, because I had a vision it's like, oh, go, 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 and negotiate, but it's not. And my philosophy is really about things like, my job is common sense. So I'm going to give you We're just going to, by a show of hands in a minute. How many people would get into a joint venture with somebody who's been 5-time bankrupt? When you went to meet him, he refused to pay and suggested that you maybe walked out the door when you had to pay the bill, where he admitted to conning his own mother, and now he wants you to loan him £20,000. Put your hand up if you would get into a joint venture with that individual. Oh, I'm seeing a hand go up, but it's slowly going down. Great. I'm glad to see you're in the right room. No, we wouldn't, would we? And now that's really common sense. But you surprised. Has anybody heard the phrase, emotions high, intelligence low? Right. Emotions high, intelligence low. When we are in the crux of the deal and Chris and I are excited because we've got this deal and the property is coming, and suddenly those sorts of decisions just go out of your mind. In fact, the problem is you don't even ask the question about whether he's been in bankruptcy. You didn't notice the fact that he didn't pay. And the conversation about his mother, you're just thinking, oh, that sounded a bit weird. Because you're not really paying attention because the emotions are high and intelligence. I'm going to try this again, guys. Just to warn you, it's Wednesday, it's 8 o'clock. And the reason that I come on, and I'm usually pretty high energy, how many people here want to get the maximum value out of our time together via show of hands? Great. I just warn you then, it's going to require a little bit of interaction. Why? Because this stuff can sometimes be a little bit dull. Usually people don't fall asleep within the first 5 minutes, but I'm just a little bit of energy. So when I ask a question, repeat it back to me. It's not for my benefit or my ego. It's more because when you repeat something back, it goes deep. It goes what? Deep. It goes deeper into your subconscious, so you won't have to write as many notes and forget it later on. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, you'll go, you know what? I know something about joint ventures. And hopefully that will then continue week on week on week on week. So the first thing is common sense. What is it?
Common sense.
Great. Just to keep you awake. The second thing is integrity and honesty. What is it?
Integrity and honesty.
The fact that you guys, and don't worry, I'm not going to get you to repeat it all every time, but just listen out. So integrity and honesty, the fact you guys are in this room, Property Investors Network, I'm the in-house lawyer for Property Investors Network. I don't work with any clients that I don't believe in or that I don't have aligned values with. And I know that I have aligned values, certainly with Simon, certainly with his team. I've been working with them for a number of years. And for me, what they do is they put their head above the parapet. They say, you know what? Sometimes the property world can be a little bit dodgy. There are some people that may be shark-like. But what I'm going to do is create what Simon wanted to do was create this environment for people where they can come, they can learn, and there's and at the heart of it, there's integrity and honesty. So integrity and honesty is really core to PIN values. And I'm not here to promote PIN. I'm just here to explain that for me, when you guys are reaching out to investors, when you guys are looking for property investors, one of the most important things is to be totally integrous and honest. And that sounds really obvious, right? But sometimes common sense is not always common sense. And integrous, and there are people who espouse something different in the property world and will be teaching something different. Integrous and honest is always the best way. So the third thing is we leave people feeling. And 25 years ago, when Mike Harris, my mentor, set up First Direct, he decided, because of the relationship between bank and individual, it was at an all-time low. I suspect it's gone even further since then, but he decided he was only going to give one instruction to his staff at First Direct. And that one instruction was, you want to leave everybody that you touch feeling totally taken care of. And that was it. He didn't give them a manual full of all the scripts they had to read. So when they got on the telephone, it was a very different experience. You have stories, and if you look it up on YouTube, you have stories of First Direct customer service staff who had certainly no more customer experience than you or I, getting on the phone and saying, yeah, you know what, your card's been lost, you're in the middle of the desert, we'll call the local shop to make sure you get some cash so that you can get home. They're just incredible stories. Why? And that's why First Direct grew as such a great brand. Now, as you guys, either as investors or as people that are going to be invested in, you need to give that same experience. You need to offer them a brand experience that is completely different to the one that each and every person in this room is going to offer. You want to offer your own unique style. Mike was talking about it earlier with brand experience, and for me, that's what he's really talking about. And just a side note, usually I'm after the tax guy. I'm not usually after the marketing guy, so I feel like I've got up in the world, thanks. So leave people feeling, setting boundaries. One of the things that's really important, and by the way, this is just a life lesson, is you set boundaries. This is what I will do, Chris, in our joint venture. That is what you're going to do. You're going to do everything from here onwards. Now, what those things are, who knows? Depends on your deal, depends on your joint venture. But he's going to do that, I'm going to do this. And when he steps over my boundaries or where he fails to do what he should do, I need to pull him up on it, and vice versa, he needs to pull me up on it. Because that's really all I do each and every day. I take common sense principles, things that I'm going to do, things you're going to do, and then I say, right, we're going to hold you to that. And that's what a contract is. And then the big one, we're going to ask what if. What if? We've got this big deal. It's a big property. It's a potentially amazing and really lucrative. Are you excited about it? The answer is yes. And it's a lot louder than that. Are you excited about this potentially big deal? Yes. Good answer. It's pink and it's sparkly and it looks all perfect, and this is the way it always is at the beginning of the deal. But you know what you need to do? You need to turn it around a little bit. Turn the deal around a little bit to see those bits that aren't just quite perfect. And then you need to think, what if this bit of fluff on that is something more deep? What if it's worse? What if my joint venture partner dies? I know, not a question you really want to ask. Or what if this deal falls apart? And you kind of look at these issues and you ask those questions of yourself. You ask what if. That's all I do most days. Common sense questions about what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? And people don't like hearing what if, but that's what helps. You ask what if and you work out this big potential. What if this isn't everything it's cracked up to be? What if the person I'm in a relationship with is not quite as they seem? What if they conned their mother? What if they disappeared and are 5-time bankrupt? Those are the questions we've got to ask. So then it comes to one of my favorites, and it's partly because I am a bit of a perfectionist, and that is progress, not perfection. What is it?
Progress, not perfection.
Celebrate. Great. Don't be scared when somebody who's doing exactly the same thing as you rocks up with a 50-page agreement and says, hey, sign this, Chris. Sign this, Francis. And you think, oh my God, that's huge. Like that, that document, I don't feel able to do that. You just need to progress along either understanding contracts or getting your own contracts. You don't need to have a 50-page contract for it to be legally binding, for it to work. We'll talk about that later on, for it to work for you. So the aim is just to progress along this property journey. You will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. And having a contract does not mean you will not make mistakes. Fact. Because it won't be about the contract. It will be about the person that you're in business with, and therefore just progress. It's not about getting it perfect. It's costly to get things perfect. And then finally, and this one's going to require a little bit of repetition, education, 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 education. Great. The fact you're in this room means education is important to you. So for me, education is about not just learning from other people, but it's about experiencing and getting things wrong and then going back and going, what did I do here? Let me just unravel everything that I did and work out what I should have done for next time. And you can be educated by just people in this room having a conversation. I often just get phone calls from people going, we're about to do this thing. I don't really know whether it's the right thing to do. What do you think? Because I've got an opinion. I've always got an opinion. So, education. Now the scorecard, as I said, you're welcome to take a copy. There is no obligation at all to give me anything, but you're welcome to take a copy of that. We're going to go through it, but we're not going to go through it in as much detail as perhaps we would have, because it can be quite dry and people get a bit upset about it. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to think about the person that you're going to do a joint venture with. That's the first thing. You are then going to think on a scale of 1 to 16. So 1, this is your personal attitude to risk. Number 1 is, well, I was a number 1 when I worked at Oric, which is a law firm. I had 3 months' notice, cushy. 3 months' notice, I had a pension. The only investment that I ever did was in an ISA. And every time I'd look at the ISA, I'd be like, right, I'm going to put all of the ISA details down there. That was my March requirement. I'm going to put all of the options in there. And then I'm going to pick the one with the highest interest rate. Job done. That was my investment. This is, if you are a number 1 in this room, put your hand up. Not many. Unlikely. In these rooms, you rarely get ones. On the other side, you have the 16, and they are like throwing caution to the wind. They are running at 100 miles an hour, and they do not care. They do not care. They're hanging off the edge of the cliff. They are the Richard Branson is probably not even a 16. They're just people that just go through life, and they'll be like, hey, good to meet you, great to meet you. Oh, you've got something, let's go for it, They're super quick, they're moving fast, they're like risk, there's no thought of any risk in anything, and they're doing it all. They'll make a mistake, and they'll kind of get up and do it all again. Me, I'd say somewhere nowadays, I'm somewhere in the 6 to 8 region, roughly, and 6 if I'm doing something for someone else. I'm a bit more risk averse if I'm doing something. If I'm working for other people, I'm more of an 8 if I'm doing something for myself, because I can make my own decisions. So this, just for the geeks in the room, this is the calculation for the spreadsheet. There's going to be somebody that's going to write it down, because I've always asked, how did you think this through? This is a scorecard that I wrote myself based on my own experience, because it's how I was describing things to clients. The usual problems in any joint venture are people. Write this phrase down. People complicate everything. And it will always be them. They don't communicate. They don't have the same values as me. They didn't do what they said they were going to do. They've made mistakes. They're not clear in their communication. It will always be them. We always know it's them. So these are the usual issues, especially in joint ventures, where you've got 2 humans, as I think Mike was saying earlier, 2 humans coming together, being humans. And joint venture is basically double the number of humans at least. So the question will be, how much do you trust these potential partners? On a scale of 1 to 4, everything's really on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 is implicit, no questions at all. Now, I trust my mother. Actually, question. All right, let's start. 1, no questions, no niggling issues. I totally trust that person. Number 4, some issues have been highlighted. On a scale of 1 to 4, knowing that my mother is a Catholic woman, I've known her my entire life, funnily enough. She is a very devout woman and very family orientated. Where do you think she comes on the scale of 1 to 4? Shout it out.
1.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? No. She comes in a 4. Why? Because in the context of property, she cannot be trusted. She has had a kitchen which has been decrepit, and it's just demoralizing. When you walk through the door, you're like, oh my God, how could you still have this kitchen? She can't make a decision how to change this kitchen. So yes, my mother, in most instances I trust as a number 1. But when it comes to property, she's a number 4. So on a scale of 1 to 4, you want to think about this joint venture partner that you thought right at the beginning. How much do you trust them? Scale of 1 to 4. And then we're looking at the losses. So we've got, how much do we trust that individual? We're looking at the person themselves. Then we're looking at actually the deal itself. 2 aspects to what we're looking at here. What type of losses are likely in a deal? Well, you could lose the property itself. So you could lose assets. You could lose your reputation, which ultimately is the worst thing that you can lose, because it's very difficult to get back, 15 years to build it, 15 seconds to lose it sort of thing. You can lose time and money. How many people here, be honest, how many people here have ever lost time or money on chasing a deal that never went through? Me too. I've lost, too many times. Time and money is the biggest one. It's the one we least value, but it's actually the most valuable. And then energy. We've got time, money, energy, actually all comes under the same. But our time and our money, most important. So I want you to think about, and it could be in your head, it could be down on paper, if everything went wrong, and I want you just to not, just for a minute, assume you don't have insurance. Assume that everything goes wrong and you lose all the money you're going to invest, or you lose all the time you're about to invest. What would happen? What's your potential loss? So for me, if I invested, let's say I invested a year worth of my time, what would happen? How much would that cost me? Let's say it's 50 to 60 grand in London. And it's a really high one for my reputation. Reputation, I always actually, even though there is a little ... there, never put a number in there because it's always going to be infinite. You're never going to be able to account for your reputation. So if a deal is going to lose you your reputation, it's probably one to think again about. If you lost that number, so let's just take 60,000. If I lost 60,000, would it be no big deal? Would it be irritating? Would it hurt? Or could I lose it all? Now, everybody in here, well, maybe not everybody, 60 grand is a good, nice number. But if we were like 20 grand, everybody in here may have a different answer. So for me, personally, it would really, really hurt, but it wouldn't mean I would lose it wouldn't mean I would lose everything. I wouldn't lose my property. It would be a really painful lesson. So I'd probably put it at 3 or 4, but it wouldn't be so painful that everything would be gone. It wouldn't wipe me out. Much more than that, and it probably would. So you need to just think about what that would mean. And you're going to get a scale, again, 1 to 4. And you're going to multiply those two numbers together. Who has actually done this so far? Just actually got those two numbers. First number, how much you trust somebody. And the second number, the potential losses. Nobody so far, you see? This is where you lose people. This is why we don't do it. This is why we don't do it live. So here is the calculation. We're now going to move on to the mitigation. This is the end. So what we've just looked at is how much we trust the individual, the potential losses that we could lose. We multiply those together, and then we're going to take off a number which is the mitigation number. And that's what I mean by bigger joint ventures with smaller risk. Because really, you're doing the same deal. You're just reducing the risk down. And my job in any contract, for example, if that's 100% of the risk, my job is to bring the level of the risk down. Because you're never going to get to here. Because every business has a risk in it. People are involved. There's always risk. So my job is to get you to go from 100% risk, where you've got nothing in place and you're just blindly walking in, to actually bringing it down to a level that feels comfortable for you. So mitigate means to reduce the severity or the consequences of something. That's all we're going to do. Now, and this is the point where it's going to require a bit of audience participation again, guys. So the first thing is knowledge. What is it?
Knowledge.
Knowledge, great. Who are you dealing with? Am I dealing with Chris? Chris's money. Is Chris's money coming into me? Is it just Chris's money? Is it Chris's mum's money? Is it Chris's partner's mum's collective behind him? I need to know not just who I'm dealing with, if it's his money, and vice versa. If Chris is giving me money, he needs to know that I'm the one who's in charge of the deal. So we need to know who each other are. Common sense, right? Yes? Common sense. Just know who you're dealing with. You'd be surprised at how many people come to me and say, I'd like you to write this joint venture agreement. Okay, who's the joint venture agreement with? Well, it's with my mate Chris. Okay, great. Then why are all these 50 other people on this document? Oh, yeah, I don't really know who they are. Know who they are. Know who they are. Why? Because promotion. You don't want to be in a position where I think I'm responsible for Chris, but actually I'm responsible for the whole room. You don't want to do that. Where are they based? Oh, there's nothing more painful than, let's say you've given somebody some money, or somebody is about to give you the money, and you're phoning them. Bring, 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 bring. I know know that that's not what mobile phones sound like. I know that I'm back in the 90s with a normal phone, but anyway. Bring, 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 bring. And nobody answers. And then one day you call and it's like, doo. They owe you money. You're like, okay, let me just go back to the documents, let me find out where they are. And you realize that all you've got is the registered address of some company that actually doesn't connect them to anything. You've never visited where they work, you don't know where they live, you've got no information about them other than probably their telephone number. And I know some of you are just sat here thinking, that would never happen to me. That's so not common sense. Of course that would never happen to me, but in the excitement of the deal, it happens to you too. To have a piece of paper or a document, a Google Docs where all the information is, visit them, have a coffee with them, know his wife, understand who Chris is or Francis, get to know them, get to know everything about them as much as you can and record it. Know where the deal is, of course. Know what you're investing in. Know who is in charge of that investment. Don't just ask the person that you're going to visit. This is not just, oh, well, they've told me this. They've given me this nice shiny brochure and it looks really nice. What do you think of my brochure, Francis? You like it? Yeah? It looks great. Brochures look great. But what are you actually doing? Find out. Dig deeper. Reputation. The benefit of you guys being in this room today is that you could ask anybody here about anybody else. In fact, if you're going to ask anybody about me, ask Samuel. I suggest. No, but you can, because it's like the perfect environment for getting case studies, for finding out, hey, that guy, did he close on that deal? What was he like to work with? How did she do? Did she ask the questions? And you would be surprised how many people that are on stage that we take for granted, because I'm you too, we take for granted have more authority than they actually do because they're on a stage. It's the expert. We think, oh, expert, they must know everything. Or, yeah, great, expert, I'll deal with them. Reputation, good, bad, indifferent, find out. So then we're going to ask about the checks, and this is part of the mitigation. How many checks have you done? I've done no checks on this person. I've kind of taken them at their word. Or I've done all the checks you can. Here are the checks that you should do if you are getting into business, a joint venture with somebody. Get their passport. Check any professional bodies that they say they're a member of. Ask people. Do a Google search. Oh, great story. I spoke at one of John Corey's events. And he had after me, usually people match speakers, which is what I was saying. Usually I'm the person that goes after the tax person. They're like, oh, great, no, we just had tax, now it's a lawyer. Oh. This guy who came after me, so I was saying, check people out on Google. And he came up and his first slide was his Google pic. And it had a picture of him. I cannot remember his name, I should really remember it. It had a picture of him, and there were two pictures. One was his LinkedIn photo, and the other was a mugshot of him. And underneath it said, landlord jailed for drug dealing. And he's like, this is what you're going to find about me when you do a Google search. So it's not, and he went on to tell this amazing story about why he was convicted of drug dealing. 3 years he spent, maybe 3 years in jail. He spent some time in jail, and it wasn't as a result of his drug dealing, but as a result of the tenant's drug dealing in his property that he found out the week before. I think it was his nephew. He'd found out the week before and said, clear it out, Peter, clear out the drugs. He said, clear it out. But because he knew about it, he actually was convicted for it. Great story, really great story. An even better story about why Google is so important. It's not because necessarily you look him up and go, he's been to jail, I'm not going to deal with him. But because then you can ask him the question, so you went to jail, tell me more. You want me to invest £20,000? Tell me more. Start small with people. Don't go full throttle into a joint venture with somebody. Work out how they work. Have a couple of coffees with them. Put your trust beads in the trust bead jar, as Brené Brown talks about. All right. So the first is knowledge. What is it? Knowledge. The second is writing. What is it? Oh, guys. Writing. What is it? Yes. Get it in writing. Why do we get something in writing? For? I didn't hear any of that.
Legal.
Legal. Contract.
People are forgetful what they agree.
People are forgetful what they agree. That's the most important one. Can you agree a contract without signing on the dotted line? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. If our handshake earlier, now you don't want to shake, do you? Because you're like, oh, yeah. We can't strictly, not just on a handshake, right? There has to be more to it. There are 5 elements of a contract, but none of those it's got to be in writing. Clarity is more important. So why do we sign? Well, first of all, we want to be able to read it, understand it, digest it, because you'd be surprised how many people go, I didn't know that was in there. I didn't know that's what you meant. The minute it goes in writing, people start questioning. I had a deal that was, not a property deal actually, had a deal that was closing last week. And until all of the documents, and it takes a long time to get all of the documents together, till all of the documents were together, seller didn't actually really understand the deal. They thought that they were going to get this lump sum up front, and actually it was going to be over a period of time. You'd be surprised when you think you both understand each other. You don't until it's in writing. So read it, understand it. Common sense, right? Read it, understand it. You'd be surprised how many people do not read their contracts, do not understand, even if they're the ones giving the contracts. So I would say, if you don't understand it, what do? Ask who? Ask a lawyer. Now, you'd think that would be my way in here, wouldn't you? Ask a lawyer. No. Ask the person that gave you the contract. Like, Chris, what does this mean? This doesn't make any sense. You know what Chris will say? It's really interesting. I think that might have been from another deal. Or, actually, I've no idea what that means either. That is classic. So read it, understand it, and if you don't understand it, go back to the person that gave you the contract and ask them for an explanation. You won't look stupid. You look stupid if you sign it and then you go, I didn't really understand that, and I knew I should have read it, and I knew I should have understood it. I am also available if you want to pick up the phone. So the 4th one is ask powerful questions. Ask powerful questions. Great. Who do we ask powerful questions of? I think I've already given you the answer. Person who gave you the contract, right? Good. And anybody else that you can ask. Like, what do you usually do when you do this, Peter? Peter, have you done this before? Tell me, how does this work? What should I be doing? What should I be thinking of? What are the things I'm missing? Can you look over this contract, Peter? Or can you just tell me, look, this is the way we're going to do it? What are you thinking? Ask powerful questions of anybody that will answer them. All right, so this will be, again, it's the mitigation section, scale of 1 to 4. What have you got in writing? Oral terms, just oral terms, then you scale it as a 1. Full agreements, totally understand it. We've got everything documented, number 4. Okay, so the second is writing. What is it?
Writing.
Great. The final one is control. What is it? Control. Ford Motor Company was set up in 1908. They owned 100%, the Ford family owned 100% of the Ford Motor Company, Limited, let's say. They now own 0.01% of the company. How much shareholder control do you think that they have? 100% why? Huh? Let's start. Alphabet shares, that's right, exactly. A and B shares. Voting shares and non-voting shares. People don't like this in the property world because they're like, I want the same shares. But they split them out into voting shares and non-voting shares. And so they've been giving away voting shares for the last, what is that, over 100, 120 years? But they still own 100% of the voting rights, which means they have control. But actually, control is not always at the shareholder level, it's often at the board level. So sometimes when we go into joint ventures and we're like, right, look, I'm going to own 90% and you're going to own 10%, Sam, okay? But you and I are both going to be on the board. What we've done is 90-10 split up here, but we've got 50-50 split at the board level. So you've got to really think about how you're structuring for control. Who owns and controls the bank account? Key element of control. You don't have to be a shareholder or director to have power and have a mandate over the well, you do have to be a director, but you don't have to control too much to know what's going on in the bank account. At least have access to zero. And we talked about voting rights, and then skills, time, and money. If you don't feel that you can structure the deal to your advantage, at least know that you can walk away when you need to. Right, down tools. My boyfriend does it all the time. He's like, I'm just downing tools. I'm not going to do anything. Because that's my level of control. That's how I can control this situation. So the third is control. What is it? Control. Great. And then we're just going to look at scale of 1 to 4. I've got no written decision-making power. I've got all the written decision-making power, voting rights, everything I need to make this my company. And it's not because of power, by the way. It's not about taking control for the sake of taking control. It's just knowing that in the event you have to take control, in the event that you lose control over the situation, you can bring it right back for you. So control is really important. Questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So basically, I started working for a construction company.
Uh-huh.
I sourced for them property for development.
Great.
And I've been offering 50-50 on starting up sourcing company.
Okay.
The owner of the company, the two partners, they want to start.
Of
And
course.
They don't have time.
Uh-huh.
They have the money. They have equipment. They have office, all the equipment. But they don't have the money. They don't have the time and to do that. They're full of tasks and people to manage.
Busy.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't have the knowledge and the experience of doing a joint venture or partnership. What, worth what, how to put it all together in the right way. That it's worth, because it's going to be like a marriage for the next couple of years, maybe more. And it's an important decision.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for someone in the beginning?
Like, never ask me if I've got any advice. Yes?
So let me refine the question.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Because this is a whole other talk. So if you're ready, we'll go for round 2. So
basically, you've got a gentleman who's embarking on a sourcing company, bringing in a set of developers because he sources predominantly development opportunities. However, he has no knowledge in terms of how to facilitate and put together that deal. The question is, what are the 3 most valuable pieces of information you, as a legal representative, would share with him?
Yeah, okay, great. First thing I would do the scorecard on both of these individuals separately. First, how much do you trust them? What are your potential losses if you lose? Sounds like if you're early doors, you've got very little to lose. And it sounds like you've got everything to gain. And on the flip side, then the question is about trust. And it won't be about trust, it'll be trust in the context of the business that you're going into, right? Construction industry is a funny one, as I understand. Not that I know everybody in the construction industry, and I don't want to put too many generalizations out there, but I do understand it takes a certain person to be very successful in the construction industry, and so you need to take that into account when it comes to being in a business partnership. That's number 1. Number 2, I would say, think very carefully. Control is going to be important for you because you're going to be outnumbered at every level. Yeah? And you're going to be outnumbered, and so therefore the question for you will be, how do you get to the point of feeling comfortable, and what are the questions that you can ask yourself around what you need in that relationship? So I would probably define, simple task, I would write down what would the ideal joint venture partnership look like for me, and I don't mean specifically, I mean, can you express, they would be generous. They would be, those sorts of words, like kind of getting to the crux of what you're really looking for in a joint venture partner, because you'd be surprised how many times we just go for what's right there instead of actually looking at the wider pool, because that would be my kind of crux for that. Actually look at what you want and see how they match up to what you want. The third thing is think about different ways of making this work. It is so, would you get married I was going to ask if you'd get married to me. Aww. That's not where I was going with
Only if there's
that.
diamond.
Would you get married to me? My boyfriend was supposed to come this evening and he refused to come, and now I've just proposed to someone else. That's what happens.
Amazing things happen at Kensington Pin.
Just can't help myself. No. Would you, let's say we've just met, we've gone on our first date, would you get married straight away?
No.
No. So I want you to think about that in the context of this relationship, because it is like a marriage. And therefore, are there things, you may have been, it sounds like you've been working with them over a period of time. Is there a way of saying, hey, look, this is our dating plan for a while. This is what it's going to look like for now. Because until I'm comfortable and I understand all this joint venture and shares and how that all fits, I don't want to get married yet. I'm not sure I want children straight away. So start with that. Many people, when you have 50-50, it ain't 50-50. You're going to be working for them with some shares. So yeah, you can, I was going to say, you got my number. Sounds even worse. You can take one of the sheets. So it's got my details on the bottom. You can get in touch with me and I'll give you in fact, the slides, the videos there's 3 videos around different ways of working through a joint venture. That would be helpful.
All right, good stuff. Is that a good answer for your
Thanks.
question?
You're welcome.
Excellent. Now, I said I was going to ask a question as well, and I want to bring out a little bit of value as I ask the question because of some of the things I've been thinking about. So, Michael spoke earlier on, and one of the things he said is, look, if you're trying to contact Coca-Cola, you're not contacting Coca-Cola, you're contacting an individual. Is this correct? All right, so you've been able to present for 45 minutes, Joe, and obviously people can pick up kind of the value that you offer and why it might be a great idea to work with NaviStar Legal, for example.
Yeah.
My question is, let's say someone wasn't in this room and they are looking for a legal representative to potentially help them move forward. What do you think they should be looking for specifically, if that makes sense?
In a lawyer or in somebody that's supporting?
In some legal support, in legal advice, because we're property people, right? And we need that in several different layers of the business, not just joint ventures and contracts. Sometimes in structuring, like I've got a sourcing company. We need to structure documents for basically everything. Our introducer agreements with brokers, our relationships with buyers, our relationships with sellers, etc. There's several layers where we need legal representatives. So what would you advise somebody who's maybe newer, starting out sourcing, letting in any kind of endeavor in property, in terms of to look for to find the right legal professional?
It's a good question, and it comes back to my philosophy earlier. For me, values match, good. If you've got a good values match and you're speaking to somebody and you go, yeah, that works for me, great. If they can help you to understand something at a deeper level, then you perhaps might understand it 50-50. If I say to Ali, yeah, 50-50, and you're like, okay, great, what does that mean? And really digging into that, for me, it's important to me. It's not necessarily important to everybody in this room. So for me, the kind of philosophy and the values that I am guided with won't necessarily hit everybody else. And Mike said it earlier. You filter people, same way with lawyers. You got to filter out the ones that don't work based on the conversation that you're having with them, because you're like, nah, that doesn't quite fit with me. I post personal stuff on LinkedIn. That to me, that's my style. I'll tell you about what's going on in my life, and I'll tell you about various different things. I tell you what, 60%, probably more than that, will be turned off by that because they'll be like, no, I need a lawyer that's got a straight face. That's never going to work. So for me, really, it's going to be personal. Yeah. But the way that we work is we're not just working in property. So business is kind of our focus, and our aim is to get you the most affordable kind of way of working. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the cheapest, but it means, okay, look, you want to do all of these, you want to take the risk from there down to here, that's going to cost you a bit of money. But if you're happy with going to there, then hey, that's well within your budget. And that's kind of the way that I think. And it really comes down to philosophy. Find out about their philosophy. Find out about the way you like to work. If you want somebody who's on your ass and making sure that you're doing everything exactly the way you need it to be done, you need to find a lawyer like that. And again, it comes down to, what do you want in a joint venture partner? I say, what do you want in a lawyer? What do you need in a lawyer? What part of your team are they going to, talent dynamics? What part of your team are they going to be? Are they going to be over here in the Lord? Are they going to be a little bit more up? I can't remember what's up.
Mechanic,
yeah. And where are they going to sit in your team? That's more important.
Excellent. Absolutely fantastic. Was that of value?
Good.
Excellent. A round of applause for
Oh, thank you.